Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. In part 3 of this series, we talked about human nature as example number 1 on how science provides evidence toward proving existence of God. We now continue with examples on intellectual reasoning, genes, physical cosmology, beginning and expansion of universe. So number 2, intellectual reasoning. As discussed in part 1, many materialists or atheists are visual and complete only stage 1 of human psyche development and partly acknowledge the second stage, which is intellect. Those who reject God's existence and rely solely on their sensory and intellect. They're looking for a God they can see, touch, and feel through experiments in the lab. However, they themselves have not been able to explain the existence of many other things, yet they believe in them. At the same time, they accept many phenomena or concepts through intellectual deduction or intellectual reasoning. Many laws and theories in physics and other science are proven only for limited number of things or objects and in limited times, yet generalized for all things. We talked about Archimedes' principle as an example, which is the physical law of buoyancy discovered by the Greek mathematician and inventor Archimedes, stating that any body completely or partially submerged in a fluid at rest is acted upon by an upward or buoyant force, the magnitude of which is equal to the weight of the fluid. The law says this is true for any body of material. But one may ask, did he test every material in the world? Of course not. He just tested a few, and from that intellectually deduced that it could hold true for other material or objects. Another example is gravity. They all agree it exists, yet they cannot explain what gravity is made out of or what is the exact source. They just know about its existence from its effect or footprint. They define it as the force by which a planet or other body draws objects toward its center. The force of gravity keeps all of the planets in orbit around the sun. That's what gives your weight. They just know gravity exists. However, when it comes to God, His creation all around us, the intelligent design and the purpose of its design on many things around us, proving God's existence, they choose to deny it. By definition, a God that exists inside our universe cannot be the creator of the universe. Sure, you cannot see Him, touch Him, or feel Him, but you can get to know Him through His creation, His signs, His work, His footprint, which are all around us, more so than gravity. In fact, let's go further. God's existence is constant, incessant, and invariable, hence in no need of proof. By looking at and contemplating on His work, we acknowledge His existence. As Sir John Templeton profoundly said, human searching for evidence of God's existence is much like a wave on an ocean searching for the evidence that the ocean exists. How nicely put. Max Planck, who was a German theoretical physicist whose discovery of energy quanta won him the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1918, and his fame as a physicist rests primarily on his role as the originator of quantum theory, who revolutionized human understanding of atomic and subatomic processes. and was well respected by Einstein and others, said, "As a man who dedicated his life to material science and study of atoms, I have concluded that nothing is as significant as the force that started and caused small particles to orbit around a center in an atomic system and holds them together in all materials. We must acknowledge and accept an intelligent being behind this force and one who keeps it in check, for its order and movement is distributed and particles within unleash a tremendous energy that is released and can be extremely destructive. He concludes the force that created such system with the stored energy and maintains its order must come from a bigger force outside this system, and that bigger force is the source, not the force within the system that is contained. This is an observation and conclusion of a scientist who is the father of quantum physics. There are some well-known scientists who may not have come straight out and acknowledged God, yet were humble enough to acknowledge the intelligent design and the force behind it. They are scientists who work with experimental and physical science, biology, genealogy, medicine, and so forth. In so many words, they acknowledge what the Quran says in this regard. قَالَ رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى. He said, our Lord is He who gave everything its creation and then guided it. ثُمَّ هَدَى, then guided it, in this verse means gave it its design to serve a purpose, aimed it to serve a purpose. In other words, He created everything with a design, purpose, and aim. The Quran summarizes all the above in many verses, such as the following, and about those who use their intellect to acknowledge His design. Surely, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alteration of night and day, there are signs for those using their minds, men of understanding. Those who remember God, saying, our Lord, you have not created these in vain, without purpose. Glory to you. Example number 3, intricacy of genes. In the introduction of his book, The Language of God, Dr. Francis Collins, who was the head of Human Genome Project and a world-leading scientist in study of DNA, an ex-atheist who now believes in God and believes that faith in God and faith in science can coexist, says, science is the only reliable way to understand the natural world, and its tool, when properly utilized, can generate profound insights into material existence. But science is powerless to answer questions such as, why did universe come into being? What is the meaning of human existence? What happened after we die? What happens after we die? One of the strongest motivation of humankind is to seek answers to profound questions, and we need to bring all the powers of both science and spiritual perspectives to bear understanding on what is both seen and unseen. Hence, religion has to be part of this equation. Then, in his book, chapter 7, Dr. Collins asserts, science cannot be used to justify discounting the great monotheistic religions of the world, which rest upon centuries of history, moral philosophy, and the powerful evidence provided by human altruism. It is the height of human hubris to claim otherwise. But that leaves us with challenge of, if existence of God is true, and if certain scientific conclusions about the natural world are true, then they cannot contradict each other. A fully harmonious synthesis must be possible. A fully harmonious synthesis must be possible. Agreed. This is exactly the position of Islam and the Quran, that there is nothing in Islam and the Quran that contradict science. And in fact, we will give few examples among many of how the Quran disclosed many scientific facts within nature and our physical world that science today has helped us confirm and gain deeper understanding. Facts that were revealed 1400 years ago by God Himself in the Quran. As a matter of fact, the Quran urges mankind to research and study the nature, find signs of God and discover His amazing creation all around us. As it says, travel in the land and see how He originated creation. After going through his work and the significance of DNA and DNA codes, Dr. Collins says, many may assume a rigorous scientist could not also be a serious believer in transcendent God. This book aims to dispel that notion by arguing that belief in God can be an entirely rational choice, and that principles of faith are in fact complementary with principles of science. And then, of course, in chapter 3 of his book, following the question of what came before the Big Bang, he says, I have to agree, Big Bang cries out for a divine explanation. It forces the conclusion that nature had a defined beginning. I cannot see how nature could have created itself. Only a supernatural force that is outside of space and time could have done that. So now, these examples, these are legitimate arguments, as we discussed in details with arguments number 1 through 7, and we're just bringing Dr. Collins' quotes as witness. What about DNA? What is the marvel of DNA sequencing? The marvel of DNA sequencing lies in its ability to precisely read the genetic code within an organism's DNA, providing detailed information about an individual's traits, susceptibility to diseases, and evolutionary history, all by deciphering the sequences of building blocks, nucleotides, and that make up their genome, essentially allowing scientists to read the blueprint of life with incredible accuracy and detail. In the context of intelligent design, DNA is often cited as a key piece of evidence supporting the idea that life was designed by an intelligent agent due to its complex structure that stores vast amounts of genetic information in a highly specific sequence, similar to a digital code, which proponents argue could not have appeared solely through random chance processes of evolution. Essentially, they claim the intricate design within DNA points to a designer rather than a purely natural process. In his article, Yes, Intelligent Design is Detectable by Science, the science philosopher and geophysicist Dr. Stephen Meyer says, Darwin explains away all evidence of apparent design in biology as he attempted to explain the origin of new living forms, starting from simpler pre-existing forms of life. But his theory of evolution by natural selection did not even attempt to explain the origin of life, the simplest living cell, in the first place. Yet, there is now compelling evidence of intelligent design in the inner recesses of even the simplest living one-celled organism. Moreover, there is a key feature of living cell, one that makes the intelligent design of life detectable, that Darwin didn't know about and that contemporary evolutionary theorists have not explained away. In 1953, when Watson and Crick revealed the structure of the DNA molecule, they made a startling discovery. The structure of DNA allows it to store information in the forms of 4-character digital code. Strings of precisely sequenced chemicals called nucleotide bases store and transmit the assembly instruction, the information for building the crucial protein molecules and machines the cell need to survive. Now, Dr. Mayer argues DNA sequences do not just possess information in the strictly mathematical sense described by pioneering information theorist Claude Shannon. Shannon related the amount of information in a sequence in symbols to the improbability of the sequence and the reduction of uncertainty associated with it. But DNA-based sequences do not just exhibit a mathematically measurable degree of improbability. Instead, DNA contains information in the richer and more ordinary dictionary sense of alternative sequences or arrangement of characters that produce a specific effect. DNA-based sequences convey instructions and then they perform functions and produce specific effects. Thus, they not only possess Shannon information, but also what has been called specified or functional information. He then says, like the precisely arranged zeros and ones in a computer program, the chemical bases in DNA convey instructions by virtue of their specific arrangement and in accord with an independent symbol convention known as the genetic code. Independent symbol convention known as the genetic code. Thus, even Richard Dawkins, in his book River Out of Eden, A Darwinian View of Life, notes, the machine code of the genes is uncannily computer-like. Similarly, Bill Gates, in his book The Road Ahead, observes that DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software we have ever created. Similarly, biotechnologist Leroy Hood, in his article, The Digital Code of DNA, describes the information in DNA as digital code after the early 1960s. Further discoveries, they come up with the information in DNA and RNA is only a complex, it's the only complex information system that we have, and an advancement in nanotechnology that mirror and exceed our own system. And this where did all this information in the cell come from? And how did the cell's complex information processing system arise? According to Mayer, these questions lie at the heart of contemporary origin of life research. Clearly, the informational feature of the cell at least appear designed And as I show in extensive detail in my book, Signature in the Cell, no theory of undirected chemical evolution explains the origin of the information needed to build the first living cell. Why? There is simply too much information in the cell to be explained by chance alone. And attempts to explain the origin of information as the consequence of biotic natural selection acting on random changes inevitably presuppose precisely what needs explaining, namely reams of pre-existing genetic information. The information in DNA also defies explanation by reference to the laws of chemistry. Saying otherwise is like saying a newspaper headline might appear from the chemical attraction between ink and paper. Clearly, something more is at work. Yet, the scientists who infer intelligent design do not do so merely because natural processes, chance, laws, or their combination have failed to explain the origin of the information and information processing system in cells. Instead, we think intelligent design is detectable in living systems because we know from experience that systems processing large amount of such information invariably arise from the intelligent causes. The information on a computer screen can be traced back to a user or a programmer. The information in a newspaper ultimately comes from a writer, from a mind. As the pioneering information theorist Henry Koestler observed, information habitually arises from conscious activity. Information habitually arises from conscious activity. So here what we need to understand is that DNA functions like a software program and contains specified information just as software does. We know from experience that software comes from programmers. We know generally that specified information, whether inscribed in hieroglyphics or written in a book or encoded in a radio signal, always arise from an intelligent source. So the discovery of such information in the DNA molecule provides strong grounds for inferring or detecting that intelligence played a role in the origin of DNA, even if we weren't there to observe the system coming into existence. Does DNA make mistakes? DNA must reproduce itself every time a cell divides. So it is important that the code remains the same in all of an organism's cells. The accuracy with which it reproduces is astounding, from the simplest single cell organism to the most complex multicellular creatures. Is DNA optimally coded? 20 different amino acids make up proteins in the human body, so the 4 bases or letters must somehow code for each one. From an engineering standpoint, is DNA optimally coded? 4 letters make up the alphabet and sets of 3 letters make up the words. According to Werner Gitt, information scientist and author, there are 4 requirements for the most efficient code. The code should use the least material to unambiguously code for at least the 20 amino acids. Number 2, as the number of characters in the alphabet increases, the complexity of the execution machinery also increases. This requires more material and results in more error during replication, transcription, and translation. Number 3, because of the DNA replication system, whereby the double helix is unzipped and each of the single strands receive complementary letters, the number of letters in the alphabet must be even. Number 4, in order to reduce error during many of the copying process, it is necessary to incorporate redundancy. In his book, Without Excuse, Dr. Gitt concludes, from an engineering standpoint and under the criteria that were considered here, the code system used in living organisms for protein synthesis, the quaternary triplet code, is the best of all possible codes considering the 4 requirements that must be met. This testifies to purposeful design. In his book, Language of God, Dr. Collins talks about laws of human nature and gives an example like true altruism or self-sacrifice to benefit others without expecting any return, and says, if this human nature cannot be explained away as cultural artifacts or evolutionary byproduct, then how can we account for its presence? Or unconditional love in human nature. These are truly unusual things. He then quotes C.S. Lewis in there, says, if there was a controlling power outside the universe, it could not show itself to us as one of the facts inside the universe. No more than an architect of a house could actually be a wall or fireplace or a staircase in that house. Rather, those things are evidence for the architect's work. The only way in which we could expect it to show itself would be inside ourselves as an influence or a command trying to get us to behave in a certain way. And that is just what we do find inside ourselves. Surely, this should arouse our suspicions about this external power. Number 4, physical cosmology. In part 1 and 2, we talked about Kalami cosmological arguments, and now we talk about physical cosmology. In earlier parts, we discussed the fact God is outside of space, matter, and time. Hence, his physical laws did not apply to him. As such, he can disrupt all the physical laws at any time, as he has done so according to believers in what we call miracles mentioned in the scriptures. If God wasn't able to break the laws of physics, he arguably wouldn't be as powerful as you would expect a supreme being to be. Can God create entities who travel faster than light? Light travels an approximate 186,000 miles per second, or 300,000 kilometers per second. We learn at school that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. However, a few years ago, a group of physicists posited that particles called tachyons traveled above light speed, but their existence as real particles is deemed highly unlikely, at least from what we know for now. If they did exist, they would have an imaginary mass and the fabric of space and time would become distorted, leading to violations of causality in our physical world, according to these scientists. It seems so far that no object has been observed that can travel faster than the speed of light. This in itself does not say anything at all about God, but it merely reinforces the knowledge that light travels very fast indeed. Things get a bit more interesting when you consider how far light has traveled since the beginning. Assuming a traditional Big Bang cosmology, and we'll talk about that later, and assuming a light speed of 300,000 kilometers per second, then we can calculate that light has traveled roughly 1.3 times 10 to the power of 23 kilometers in the 13.8 billion years of the universe's existence, or rather the observable universe's existence. The question then about God moving faster than light or being in two places at the same time is nonsense, because God need not travel at any speed. His presence is everywhere. If you believe in God, then the idea of God being bound by the laws of physics is nonsense, because God can do everything, even create beings who can travel faster than light. If you don't believe in God, then the question is equally nonsensical, because there isn't a God and nothing can travel faster than light. At the rate the universe is expanding, it is estimated that the distance to the edge of the universe is 46 billion light years. As time goes on, the volume of space increases, hence light has to travel for longer to reach us. There's a lot more universe out there than we can view, but the most distant object that we have seen is a galaxy called GNZ 11, observed by the Hubble Space Telescope, which is approximately 13.4 billion light years away, meaning that it has taken 13.4 billion years for light from this galaxy to reach us. But when the light set off, the galaxy was only about 3 billion light years away from our galaxy, the Milky Way. As Terry Pratchett said in The Reaper Man, light thinks it travels faster than anything, but it is wrong. No matter how fast light travels, it finds the darkness has always got there first and is waiting for it. Many cosmologists believe that the universe may be part of a more extended cosmos, a multiverse. We cannot observe or see across the entirety of the universe that has grown since the Big Bang, because insufficient time has passed for light from the first fractions of a second to reach us. Some argue that we therefore cannot be sure whether the laws of physics could be broken in other cosmic regions. Perhaps they are just local, accidental laws. And that leads us on to something even bigger than the universe, the multiverse. According to Monica Grady, who is the professor of planetary and space science at the Open University, many cosmologists believe that the universe may be part of a more extended cosmos, a multiverse, where many different universes coexist but don't interact. The idea of the multiverse is backed by the theory of inflation, the idea that the universe expanded hugely before it was 10 to minus 32nd old. Inflation is an important theory because it can explain why the universe has the shape and structure that we see around us. She continues, but if inflation could happen once, why not many times? We know from experiments that quantum fluctuations can give rise to pairs of particles suddenly coming into existence only to disappear moments later. And if such fluctuations can produce particles, why not entire atoms or universes? It's been suggested that during the period of chaotic inflation, not everything was happening at the same rate. Quantum fluctuations in the expansion could have produced bubbles that blew up to become universes in their own right. But how does God fit into multiverse? One headache for cosmologists has been the fact that our universe seems fine-tuned for life to exist. Our universe seems fine-tuned for life to exist. So, according to Professor Grady, the fundamental particles created in the Big Bang had the correct properties to enable the information and also the formation of hydrogen and deuterium, substance which produced the first stars. The physical laws governing nuclear reactions in these stars then produced the stuff that life's made of: carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. How come all the physical laws and parameters in the universe happen to have the values that allow the stars, planets, and ultimately life to develop? Some argue it's just a lucky coincidence. Others say we shouldn't be surprised to see bio-friendly physical laws. They, after all, produced us, so what else would we see? This goes back to the argument we presented, that is, who created those physical laws friendly to us? Was it the dumb nature that has no will, no consciousness, and no intelligence? We believers argue it points to the existence of the God who created these favorable conditions. In addition, the theory of multiverse allows different universes to have different physical laws. So it's not surprising that we should happen to see ourselves in one of the few universes that could support life. Of course, you can't disprove the idea that a God may have created the multiverse, one who is beyond the multiverse. Number 5, the beginning and expansion of universe. In 1929, the American astronomer Edwin Hubble made one of the most important discoveries in the history of astronomy. Observing a number of stars through his huge telescope, he discovered that their light was shifted toward the red end of the spectrum, that is. This shift was directly related to the distance of the stars from Earth. This discovery had an electrifying effect in the world of science because, according to the recognized rules of physics, the spectra of light and light beams traveling toward the point of observation tend toward the violet color, while the spectra of light beams moving away from the point of observation tend toward red color. During Hubble's observation, the light from stars was discovered to tend toward red. This meant that they were constantly moving away from us. Before long, Hubble made another important discovery. The stars weren't just racing away from Earth, they were racing away from each other as well. The only conclusion that could be derived from a universe where everything moves away from everything else is that the universe constantly expands. To better understand the universe, it can be thought of as a surface of a balloon being blown up. Just as the points on the surface of a balloon move apart from each other as the balloon is inflated and blown up, so do the objects in space, and they do move apart from each other as the universe keeps expanding. In fact, this had been theoretically discovered even earlier. Albert Einstein had concluded after the calculation he made in theoretical physics that the universe could not be static. However, he had laid his discovery to rest simply not to conflict with the widely recognized static universe model of his time. Later, Einstein identified his act as the greatest mistake of his career. Subsequently, it became definite by Hubble's observations that the universe expands. What's so important about the fact that the universe expands? The expansion of the universe implied that if it could travel backward in time, the universe would prove to have originated from a single point. The calculations showed that this single point that harbored all the matters of the universe should have zero volume. The universe had come about by the explosion of this single point with zero volume. This great explosion that marked the beginning of the universe was named the Big Bang, and the theory started to be called so. It has to be stated that zero volume is a theoretical expression used for descriptive purposes. Science defines the concept of nothingness, which is beyond the limit of human comprehension, by expressing it as a point with zero volume. In truth, a point with zero volume means nothingness. The universe has come into being from nothingness. In other words, it was created. The Big Bang Theory showed that in the beginning all the objects in the universe were of one piece and then were parted. The expansion of the universe is one of the most important pieces of evidence that the universe was created out of nothing. Although this fact was not discovered by science until the 20th century, God has informed us of this reality in the Quran, revealed 1400 years ago, as it hints in chapter 51, and the heaven we constructed with strength, and indeed we are expander. We are its expander. As clearly seen, the Big Bang Theory proved that the universe was created from nothing. In other words, created by God. For this reason, the materialist astronomers continue to hold out against the Big Bang in their struggle to uphold a fundamental tenet of their ideology. The reason was made clear by the leading materialist physicist Arthur Eddington, who said, philosophically, the notion of an abrupt beginning to the present order of nature is repugnant to me. Sir Fred Hoyle was one of those who were disturbed by the Big Bang Theory as well. In the middle of the century, Hoyle championed a theory called the steady state theory, which was similar to the constant universe, which was an approach made in the 19th century. The steady state theory argued that the universe was both infinite in size and eternal in duration, with the sole visible aim of supporting the materialist philosophy. This theory totally opposed the Big Bang Theory, which held that the universe had a beginning. Those who defended the steady state theory remained adamantly opposed to the Big Bang for years. Science, however, was working against them. In 1948, George Gamow came up with another idea concerning the Big Bang. If the universe was formed in a sudden cataclysmic explosion, there ought to be a definite amount of radiation left over from the explosion. This radiation should be detectable and Furthermore, it should be, uniform throughout the universe. In 1965, two researchers by the name of Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson discovered a form of radiation unnoticed up to then. This radiation, called the cosmic background radiation, did not seem to radiate from a particular source, but rather pervaded the space as a whole. It was soon realized that this radiation was the echo of the Big Bang, still reverberating since the first moments of the great explosion. Penzias and Wilson were awarded a Nobel Prize for their discovery. In 1989, NASA sent the Cosmic Background Explorer, COBE, satellite into space to do research on cosmic background radiation. It took only 8 minutes for the sensitive instruments on board the satellite to detect and confirm the levels of radiation reported by Penzias and Wilson. The COBE had found the remains of the big explosion that had taken place at the outset of the universe. Defined as the greatest astronomical discovery of all times, this finding explicitly proved Big Bang theory. The findings of the COBE-2 satellite, which was sent into space after the COBE satellite, also confirmed the calculations based on the Big Bang. More evidence for the Big Bang was forthcoming. One piece had to do with the relative amount of hydrogen and helium in the universe. Observations indicated that the hydrogen-helium concentration in the universe was in accord with theoretical calculation of what should have been remained after the Big Bang. That drove another stake into the heart of the steady-state theory, because if the universe had existed for eternity and never had a beginning, all of its hydrogen should have been burned into helium. All of this compelling evidence caused the Big Bang theory to be embraced by the scientific community. The Big Bang model was the latest point reached by science concerning the formation and beginning of the universe. What we are saying here is that the Big Bang provided a scientific proof for the philosophical argument number 1 we presented in part 1 of this series. According to Stephen Hawking's book, A Brief History of Time, defending the steady-state theory alongside Fred Hoyle for years, Dennis Sciama described the final position they had reached after all the evidence for the Big Bang theory was revealed. Sciama stated that he had participated in the heated debate between the defenders of the steady-state theory and those who tested the theory with the hope of refuting it. He added that he had defended the steady-state theory not because he deemed it valid, but because he wished that it was true. Fred Hoyle stood out against all objections as evidence against the theory began to unfold. Sciama goes on to say that he had first taken a stand along with Hoyle, but as evidence began to pile up, he had to admit that the game was over and that the steady-state theory had to be dismissed. Professor George Abel from the University of California also states that currently available evidence shows that the universe originated billions of years ago with the Big Bang. He concedes that he has no choice but to accept the Big Bang theory. With the Big Bang's victory, the concept of eternal matter that constituted the basis of materialist philosophy is thrown away. What then was before the Big Bang, and what was the power that brought the universe into being with this big explosion when it was non-existent? This question certainly implies, in Arthur Eddington's words, the philosophically unfavorable fact for the materialists, that is, of the existence of a creator. Many scientists who do not blindly condition themselves to be atheists have admitted the role of an almighty creator in the creation of the universe. This creator must be a being who has created both matter and time, yet who is independent of both. In his book, The Creator and the Cosmos, the well-known astrophysicist Hugh Ross has this to say: if time's beginning is concurrent with the beginning of the universe, as the space theorem says, then the cause of the universe must be some entity operating in a time dimension completely independent of and pre-existent to the time dimension of the cosmos. This conclusion is powerfully important to our understanding of God. It tells us that God is not the universe itself, nor is God contained within the universe. Nor is God contained within the universe. Of course, we believe space, matter, and time are created by the Almighty Creator, who is independent of all these dimensions. We stop here and continue with points or examples 6 through 8 from scientific perspective next time, inshallah. Wassalamu ala man ittaba'a al-huda.